Chapter 11. The warning came as a tremor through the station's spine. Too clean to be mechanical failure. Too brief to be a meteor strike. On the ops deck of Mercy Reach, a junior controller muttered that the diagnostics were wrong. 3 seconds later, the Kareth proved they weren't. The first cut arrived without light. A pressure, harmonic, subsonic, passed through bulkheads and along trussed corridors, and every unsecured object on the deck sang once like crystal before cracking. The second cut rode the first, a slice of space that tore the station's forward docking crown from its bearings. No fire, no debris cloud, just absence, edges smoothed as if by time. By the time the human defense grid woke, its targeting solutions were a mess of ghosts. Mercy Reach spun, groaning. Somewhere in the lower habitat ring, water found new gravity, escaped a ruptured tank, and became rain inside a flood-lit corridor. People ran because people always run, and that motion felt like control, even when it wasn't. "Identify hostile," the ops chief said, voice raw. "Nothing on visual," someone answered, and then almost apologetic. "I'm reading chords." Engineers cursed, not at the enemy. No one had eyes on the enemy, but at the persistence of assumptions. Human war was built on vectors and mass. The Kareth had brought something else. Resonance tuned to structure. Equations expressed as pressure differentials. They did not punch. They unmade precisely where the math told them the station was most itself. The third cut found the reactor's outer sheath. Emergency fields caught and held for 3 godlike breaths, then guttered. Mercy Reach had been built to endure impact, fire, loss of spin. It had not been built to endure being told, down to the bolt, that it could be parted from itself. On a conference floor 1 level below the ops deck, a Vantadyne liaison team watched ceiling lights die in sequence. The wall display held for an instant longer on battery, a schematic of the station rendered in cheap amber lines. As segments winked out, crown, ring, core, the display marked them with neat X's, as if crossing off items on a list. "This is a demonstration," someone said. "They're telling us to stop." "They're telling us we can be vacuum in minutes," someone else said. No one said Kareth. No one had to. Out beyond the contested edge, the company's analysts had been whispering the name for months, careful not to give it to public channels. Survey crews pushed outward. Silent disappearances followed. The pattern sharpened and then, as if bored of ambiguity, stepped into view. On the surviving ops screens, a shadow crossed the stars. No hull lines, no emission signature. Just a crescent absence where starlight should have been. The ops chief lifted a hand, let it fall, lifted it again, and understood that there would be no salvos fired, no triumphant last stand. "Signal the cease," he said, out of reflex more than conviction. The cease was signaled. The shadow did not answer. It did not need to. The fourth cut took the station's communications lattice and left the room in a silence that felt personal. Vantadyne's emergency shuttle departed on a cold thrust that left no plume. Through the port, Mercy Reach dwindled from station to silhouette to a strand of glittering fragments that did not scatter but drifted together in a coherent cloud, as if the math that had broken them still held them in its palm. No pursuit came. The lesson had already landed. The shuttle docked with a courier at the edge of the Sekatoan approach. In the courier's conference tube, under strips of light that hummed just slightly off-key, a half-dozen company people waited for orders that would not make sense when they arrived. The air smelled of pressurized plastic and fear. San sat at the end of the tube, hands folded around a warm cup she had not sipped. Her badge read, Liaison, Frontier Politics Grade 3, Mid-Level, Removable. She watched the others with a practiced attention that did not quite look like watching. Eyes moving when voices moved, breath even, footfalls catalogued without seeming to notice them. Panic is a rhythm, she knew. Once you hear the time signature, you can speak through it. A director arrived half a step ahead of his voice. Alland, years younger than the man who would one day preside over Moonbase Nova, but already carrying that habit of speaking like every word had been pre-weighed in a vacuum chamber. He took in the faces, the posture, the way some people pretended to check slates so they did not have to meet anyone's eyes. "We pushed too far," he said without preamble. "We ignored clear signals. We cannot fight a war we cannot measure." A logistics lead, wide-shouldered, still wearing the ghost of Mercy Reach's enviro dust on his cuffs, bristled. "We can mobilize 3 reserve flotillas within 6 weeks, with privateer contracts." "Against what?" Alland asked, not unkind. Do you propose to shell a cord? The man fell silent. Alan glanced at San, and the room felt very slightly as if it had been drawn into focus. You were on Sekatoan arbitration before this, he said. You spoke with the minor houses. You read the fringe traffic better than my own analysts. Tell me what we are inside. San set the cup down. When she spoke, her voice was low, calibrated for rooms that held more ego than oxygen. We are inside an equation, sir. We altered a term without declaring it. We were corrected. That's poetry, someone muttered. It's logistics, San said, and there was no heat in it. We built Mercy Reach where our lawyers believed the line would lie, then extended our survey corridor like a finger across a lap. We assumed the Kareth would respond as we would. Signal, posture, display assets. They don't. They hum at structures until the structures agree to separate. War then, said another. We draw the fleets. We make noise of our own. Noise against resonance? San asked. She did not shake her head. She did not need to. The director's eyes said he had already shaken his. Vanterdyne survives by not being the story. We fought pirates with contracts and courts. We cannot negotiate with this as if it were a raider captain who wants a better price. Alan looked down at his slate. He had not opened it. You are officially a mid-level liaison. You are, unofficially, the only person in this room who does not sound like they are writing a report to excuse a loss. He paused, then added with something like humor burned clean away. And the only person who did not flinch when the lights dropped. San did not say that flinching was a habit earned by bodies that break at speed, and that she had been built for other velocities. She let the silence do that work. We need a delegation, Alan said. We need it now, not a request for terms, a proposal for a wall that holds. Who? The logistics lead asked. Who do we send that they will tolerate long enough to speak? Not a general, San said. Not a minister. Not anyone who will arrive with a story to perform. Someone who can hold protocol in one hand and arithmetic in the other. She did not say me. She did not have to. You'll lead it, Alan said, as if continuing her sentence. You'll assemble a frame. You'll travel under neutral flag to a station that can host without taking sides. And you will come back with a boundary we can sell to governments that still think expansion is a law of nature. A murmur broke around the table. It sounded like relief wearing the clothes of dissent. Someone said she was too junior. Someone else asked what made her qualified. Alan let them finish, then cut the air with a small motion that was almost a kindness. She's qualified because she isn't writing speeches in her head while we talk, he said. Because she doesn't have an office with a window. Because the Kareth speak in patterns and she listens for them instead of pretending they're noise. The courier shuddered, not with an attack but with a dock's release. Thrusters shifted the frame and the floor told everyone politely to plant their feet. San did not move. You'll leave within the day, Alan said. We'll broker a host through one of the neutral interlocks. We'll keep the military out of visual range. We'll stop losing stations. Or we will learn we cannot stop losing, someone said bitterly. San's mouth moved, a gesture that might have been sympathy if it had been larger. Then we will learn it quickly, before we bet the species on the wrong math. The meeting dissolved not because anyone adjourned it, but because necessity pulled at each person's sleeve. Schedules bloomed on slates. Requests rattled across channels. Somewhere aft, stevedores argued over whose crates counted as emergency cargo. In the corridor, a medic stopped to sit with their head in their hands for 30 seconds, and then stood up and kept walking. San stayed where she was until the others had left. She touched the rim of the cup as if taking the temperature of a room, then stood. At the hatch, Alan waited as if he had always intended to. Perhaps he had. You understand, he said, that if you fail there isn't a second attempt. She nodded once. If I fail there will not be much of anything. He looked as though he might smile and decided not to. You'll have 2 analysts. Choose them for memory, not charm. You'll have a legal scaffold that can fold if you see the wrong wind. And you'll have a ship that can run silent through whatever they call a road. San inclined her head in a movement that belonged to no academy. I'll need access to all boundary surveys in the Sekatoan approach. Unredacted. Alan's mouth flattened. You'll have them. And authority to extend provisional assurances without a vote. You'll have the authority to not collapse in a hallway when they change the gravity, he said dryly. Then more gently, yes. She stepped past him into the corridor. The courier's lights flickered once. Routine load balancing, the text would say. Muscle memory in the ship's skin, San thought. She walked toward the docking ring with her hands at her sides. shoulders loose, as if she had decided long ago how to carry her weight when other people dropped theirs. Behind her, the windowless conference tube emptied of heat. Ahead, pilot lights pricked in a sequence down the spine, marking the path to a launch that would either draw a line the species could live with, or confirm that there were no lines left to draw. The station had been built by a people who disliked doors. Corridors widened and narrowed according to breadth. Panels thinned and thickened with the pressure of nearby voices, and the walls sang back to those who spoke. Softly, just enough to remind you that nothing you said would ever be alone in the room. The humans called it Atria because the official designation had too many consonants. The station did not care what it was called. It listened. The human delegation entered like a field team pretending to be a government. Their courier had been short on fuel, and shorter on decorum by the time it docked. And the 6 people who stepped into Atria's receiving crescent carried mismatched slates, a briefcase with a broken latch, and expressions that oscillated between determination and nausea. Their security detail consisted of 2 technicians in rebadged envirosuits. The Koreth attendants watched without blinking, not disapproval, calculus. San walked behind the nominal head of delegation, a minister whose last experience with non-humans had involved a ceremonial toast at a trade fair. His jacket was pressed. His eyes were rimmed red. He held to his script like a buoy. San carried no slate. Her hands were empty and folded. They crossed into the main hall under a ceiling of woven crystal that pulsed with the announcer tone. The Koreth waited already placed. 5 delegates in cloaks of thread glass that turned the chamber's air into faint rainbows where the light struck. They did not stand. They did not need to. Their presence had the patience of geology. Atria adjusted the gravity by 0.5%, and the human minister took it as a bow. He inclined his head a degree too low. On behalf of Vantadine and the human councils, The eldest Koreth delegate spoke, and his voice arrived in 3 strands, a primary tone, then 2 echoes delayed by a heartbeat, like a chord stepping into itself. The stone-born arrive with paper in their lungs, he said. They will try to breathe through it. We ask them not to choke. The minister's smile froze, then tightened. He did not understand, not truly, but he understood enough to be offended. San felt the walls listening curve toward the Koreth and keep curving. She shifted her stance to widen her breath and let the gravity have her. Her role here was wait. The second Koreth delegate added a thinner line of sound. We are convened at Atria by call and reply. The call was your cutting. The replies are listening. Speak carefully. The walls prefer good stories. We acknowledge your presence, the minister said, attempting to find his footing in a room with no floors. We come in good faith to prevent further mistakes. He glanced at San, once, then back away. We are prepared to discuss terms that... Terms are stones, the eldest said, and you are players of stones. We do not play. We place. The human legal council, pale and stopped at the eyes, leaned in to whisper numbers meant to sound like respect. Every syllable landed like a coin in damp soil. The Koreth heard the sound a metal makes when dropped into a well, and did not lean closer. San kept watching, not the words. Those would keep coming. Panic could power speech for hours, but the timing. The Koreth were not crushing. They were refusing to spend motion. It was a different cruelty. Atria flashed a low tone. Announcer again. The floor rippled, very slightly around the Koreth dais. The detail said, the hall is accommodating them first. The minister missed it. San did not. We observed the minister began, then stalled on the word. He had sovereignty written on the script in his head and no place to put it. Zones, he finished weakly. We believed we were operating just outside the, agreed edges. The third Koreth delegate, bones close to his skin, let out a sound that might have been humor. Edges, he repeated, and the wall repeated it back, tasting it. You press your mouths to the cake and say you have not eaten because your tongue did not cross the icing. The legal counsel tried again and San let him. It served to soak up the room's contempt and leave some left over for her to reframe. The council spoke of precedent and star charts. The Koreth listened until the speaking tired itself, then spoke with the steadiness of tide. You sprint, said the eldest, and call the sprint a march. You bleed and call the bleeding victory. You are short in memory, and so you mistake repetition for persistence. Shortened memory ran through the wall twice and came back harsher. The minister drew breath like he might lunge across the air and insist that humans remembered plenty when it benefited them. San stepped forward half a shoe length, and the motion caught his peripheral vision. He swallowed what would have been said and let it die in favor of something less final. "We have lost a station," he said instead. "We have lost lives. We come to prevent more of both." One of the Kareth tilted his head, and only his head, nothing else moved, and it was astonishing how much dismissal could live in that small motion. "You lost nothing. You learned. If you had lost, your mouths would not open." San closed her eyes for one count of pulse. The minister reached for the script again. She spoke before he could find it. "We came," she said, not portioning her voice for the human side of the room. She spoke toward the wall, and the wall carried her forward. "We came because we cannot afford to misunderstand you twice. We came because we build too quickly. When we build where we should not, we are asking to be corrected. But to be corrected without language is to be taught like children with fire. We are not fireproof." Heads turned, human toward her, Kareth not at all, and the elder's chest rose the smallest fraction. The second delegate's echo picked up the last word and returned it as a question. "Fireproof?" The syllables made a minor chord, and Atria liked it. San did not pretend to hear approval. She offered the thing she had, which was the truth of a limited species wrapped in the stubbornness of a large company. "We run fast," she said. "We die fast. The only way we make anything that lasts is to pass it hand to hand before we stop running. That makes us look like thieves. Sometimes it makes us thieves, but it also makes us come back after we have been burned." She measured her breath against the hall. "We will keep coming back unless you tell us how to stop without dying. We will accept a wall if we can see it and name it and teach it to those who run after us." The youngest Kareth made a small sound. Not quite assent. "You want the oath to look like a fence," he said, the word fence arriving awkward under his tongue, as if borrowed. "We want the oath to be a story our short lives can remember," San said. She did not say Sakatuan. The humans had a name and the Kareth had an older one, and this room made the older one heavier. "If we can teach it as something more than punishment, we will teach it. If it is only punishment, we will test it again and again until the testing kills us or you tire. We do not think you tire. We would rather not die." Silence spun around the dais like a ring. The minister had the look of a man who had stepped through a door and discovered the room continued beyond the wall. The Kareth let 3 heartbeats go by, then 6, still building nothing on top of the offer. They were tasting whether this was persistence or performance. "Stone players," the elder said at last, and the harmonics took the words and smoothed them, trying to move stars. San inclined her head an angle that would not be misread. "We play stones because we cannot move stars," she said. "We are asking you to let us keep our hands. We are asking you to tap our wrists when they stray and not crush our fingers." She paused, then let the smallest edge of practicality into her voice. "If you do that, we can be useful, in ways that do not cross your oath." Atria dimmed the lights by a measure most eyes would have missed. The wall had heard a shape of compromise and was adjusting acoustics to cradle it. The second delegate exhaled, a chord inside a chord. "The wall listens," he said. "It likes that you named your death speed instead of hiding it." The eldest did not smile. He did not perform relief. He looked at San like an artisan examining a tool too simple to do fine work and too stubborn to break. "The day does not collapse," he said. "We have more walls to measure." He shifted a hand, and the dais lifted the subject from entry ritual to catalogued grievance. Charts unfolded in the air. Node positions and trespass vectors. Reports of probes that had been lost, because that word felt less like theft. San listened. The minister breathed. The council wrote a phrase that began with pursuant, and then stopped when he realized no one in this room would ever say pursuant with a straight face. By mid-cycle, the Kareth permitted a pause, not a recess. They did not leave. They simply reduced their harmonics and let the room lower its pulse. It was the largest concession of the day. In a side channel, unamplified, the minister whispered, "What did you do?" San kept her eyes on the dais. "I said we are small," she said. "They like truth if it is shaped like responsibility. They will not praise it, but they will not end the talk today." He nodded without understanding, and that was enough. When the wall signaled that listening had resumed, San stepped back to let the minister wear his title and make the face of the approach. He found his lines easier now that someone had named the room's gravity. He missed half the insults that followed, which was a mercy. At day's end, the hall let them leave. The Kareth had not promised anything because they did not need to. They had not withdrawn anything either. The wall took a final soft echo of San's breath and returned it to her, warmer by a fractional degree. Fragile, she thought, but real. Enough for a second day, enough to take to a species that wanted victories and would have to learn to live with footholds. By the 7th cycle, the room knew their breaths. Atria's walls adjusted to human cadence without favoring it, softening the edges of consonants that always arrived too hard, catching the Kereth harmonics, and returning them with the exact delay those voices considered respectful. The first day's collisions had sanded to friction. Not peace contact. San no longer stood behind the minister. She stood level with him, half a step out, where a listener could become a hinge if she chose. The Kereth did not announce that they were addressing her more than the others, but the room did. The light pooled on her column when the elder spoke, and the floor grown under her feet was firmer by a fraction. To most eyes it was nothing. To hers it was an admission. You are a known quantity now. The opening exchange was a ritual that had built itself out of repetition. The eldest Kereth delegate would pulse a low chord that meant, "We remember yesterday." The minister would reply with an acknowledgement that meant, "We have not changed our names." Then San would take the line the room left open and place a truth in it. This time she offered a small thing first. "Our maps use star names," she said, letting her words pass through Atria so the echoes aligned. "We attach them to our dead, so we do not redraw them easily. It makes us bad at boundaries." "Stones labeled with bones," murmured the thin-boned Kereth, not unkindly. "We name currents. They do not die." "If you anchor the boundary to currents," San said, "our children will change the names of stars and not move the line by accident." She did not say, "or by ambition." The room heard it anyway. They let her keep the lead. The week had taught them she would not waste it. The Concord's envoy, connected to the elder line by a braid of authority woven into his cloak, unspooled a vertical sheet of glyphs, a map that was more music than chart unfurled in the air. Dense nodes where gravity pooled, thin threads where slipspace tensed, the tidal folds of the dark between systems. The Kereth called it the Long Weave. Humans had never named it because most of them could not see it. "The Oath Horizon," the envoy intoned, and Atria hummed agreement, "shall be placed where the deep tides lean into each other and hold." He indicated a sweeping curve. No straight lines anywhere, only arcs upon arcs. "Your species will not step with ships whose cores sing louder than a scout's into this water." The minister drew breath like a man about to announce a refusal he had rehearsed in private. San redirected it. "We will not," she said, speaking before the refusal could find purchase. She let the words carry as commitment, not concession. "We will place our stones on our side of that curve and teach the names of it to those who run after us." The elder's head tilted a single degree, approval, or the shape that substituted for it. The humans wanted guarantees against sudden annihilation. The Kereth wanted guarantees against the human habit of renaming trespass as curiosity. Neither could have what they wanted in the form they wanted it. San reached for the one overlap they had found and enlarged it. "Our species forgets in small spans," she said, not pleading. "So we build memory outside the body. We will propose enclaves along our side of the oath, stations with the face of science. We will publish the surface of their work. We will keep their roots in listening." She did not translate listening into intelligence. The wall would have rejected it. "Stone houses that hear currents," the eldest said, harmonics measuring her for gall and finding none. "Placed where?" San gestured to the map's human overlay. The minister's council had labored nights to paste star grids around the long weave. She ignored them. She touched 3 points where the currents bulged toward human lanes, and the oath bowed in reply. "Here, here, and here. Names can change. Tide shapes won't." The envoy considered. "You will hide knives in blankets," he said, simply stating. "You will call them pillows to those who are children of your sprint." The second echo of his voice added, "We are not deceived." The third, "We will allow it." "We will call them places where we learn to rest our hands," San said. "Because if we do not, our hands will stray." She felt the minister's glance, a quick flick of worry about optics. She held his worry the way one holds a cup to keep it from rattling on the table. "We will file charters," she added in a voice only the human half of the room would hear. "Public. Boring. The kind that make men in committees feel important." Atria liked the juxtaposition. Truth in one register, mechanism in the other. It shifted the hall's pitch up half a measure, which in its grammar meant, "Good. Proceed." The ritual of exchange began, not signatures. The Kereth did not believe ink could hold what throats had not. They placed terms into each other's keeping by speaking them and letting Atria record the harmonics. Each clause was a shaped chord. The Oath horizon would be placed along the specified tide arc, recalibrated by cycle according to mutually visible deep tide measures. Human vessels with cores rated beyond exploration class would not cross. Kareth enforcers would remain beyond the Oath unless invoked by breach defined in the very words the hall was recording. Monitoring enclaves, San did not wince at the human euphemism Sekatoan calibration sites when the council insisted. She simply let the Kareth hear the truth under the name could be established on the human side. Their published work would concern atmospheric science, geodesy, radiation. Their unpublished work would be listening. If an enclave became a knife, it would be seized in the language of soil and silence. The Kareth did not say turning the soil out loud. They hummed the chord that meant it. The wall trembled. When the clause that would become human shorthand for the line's name arrived, the minister tried to reclaim authority with ceremony. "The Sekatoan boundary," he announced, reading from a prepared slate that insisted on human letters. The Kareth let the word touch the air and did not acknowledge it. San did not force them. She layered it beneath theirs. "Oath horizon," she said, voice even. "Sekatoan to our short memory. Oath to yours. The curve is the same." Atria stored both names. The treaty would hold two titles like a blade with two edges. Questions rose and fell. Transit rights for civilian medevac ships that might brush the curve. Distress protocols. Radio silence expected where the tide sang too loudly for words to travel clean. The Kareth refused the human hunger for contingency trees that reached the ceiling. "If you need branches that high," the elder said, harmonics flat, "you plan to climb." San let the minister swallow his rebuttal. "We will build footholds instead," she said. "We will teach our children not to sprint at night." The envoy looked at her for a fraction longer than courtesy allowed. "You make your shortness into a tool," he observed. "It cuts both ways." "We dull it on purpose when we can," San replied. The room began to cool. Atria lowered the register for closure. Only the pledge remained. The ritual that would put bones under the words. The Kareth elders rose, not standing so much as letting gravity remember them again. The humans stood in the old terrestrial way, legs slightly apart as if braced for weather. The pledge was paired, ancient, and indifferent to flourish. "We remember," said the Kareth, the threefold voice filling the hall. "We agree to remember," said San for the human side. She did not let the minister speak. He looked at her afterward and realized he was grateful. "We do not cross the Oath horizon with teeth," the elders intoned. "We do not press our hands through the fence," San answered, choosing the human metaphor because it would nest in human mouths. "If we forget, we answer," the elders said, and the wall shivered with the chord that meant soil. "If we forget, we accept the answer," San said, and the wall took the weight of that and made it a stone. Silence followed, deep and simple, not the brittle pause of earlier days. The terms now lived in the chamber's structure. The treaty would travel as copies and codes and ceremonial plaques, but the only version that mattered was the memory Atria held, which could not be edited and would not forgive. The Kareth delegates withdrew first, unhurried as erosion. The human contingent remained as people always remain when the signature is invisible and the stakes are not, looking for something to touch that proves a thing exists. The council wanted a stamp. The minister wanted applause. San wanted to sit down. She did not. In the narrow passage to the human quarters, the minister stopped. Gratitude made him formal again. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked softly. Meaning, stand in a room like that and refuse to be moved by contempt. Make our weakness sound like a tool. Take responsibility without pleading permission to use it. San looked at the curve of the corridor as it met itself. "We are small," she said. "Small things survive by rhythm. If we can hear theirs, we can set ours next to it without being broken." "You weren't afraid," he said. She was, though not in the way he meant. She feared drift, not death, the way a species could slip out of its own story if it could not hold a line. She did not gift him that answer. "I have work," she said, and moved past. Behind her, the team exhaled like divers breaking surface. They would brief the councils, convert currents into coordinates, carve the new curve, Sekatoan, the memos would say, on every relevant chart. They would propose the first calibration sites to the board, each with public instruments and private ears. The Kareth would watch the fence they called a vow and test whether the stone players kept their hands. Balance had been declared, not proven. Disdain lingered in the hall's bones, but the door into war had been pushed shut on well-set hinges. For now it would hold. Later that night, in a room designed to mimic human privacy, Two junior aides admitted in whispers that San's composure unsettled them. "She doesn't blink," one said. The other disagreed. "She did, but not at human times." They let the thought run out, and sleep took them heavily. The way it does after the body has been allowed to believe it will wake into a world that still includes tomorrow. San neither defended nor corrected them. She sat alone and listened to the station listening to her, and matched her breathing to the treaty's new, careful rhythm. The slip drive's containment cage made a sound that wasn't a sound. Pressure on the bones rather than the air. It pulsed through the hull in a measured interval, too exact to be organic, too gentle to be mechanical bravado. San matched her breathing to it without thinking. 4 slow inhales to a pulse, 4 slower exhales. Her lungs did not need the help. Her habits did. The berth was spare by design. A narrow couch with restraint mesh folded like a ribbon beside it. A fold-down shelf that doubled as desk. 2 hand-width lockers inset into the bulkhead, and a mirror that could pretend to be a viewport when the pilot wanted the illusion of horizon. San kept it as a mirror. The shuttle already tore a hole in distance. She did not need to fake a window to remember where she was. On the shelf, a wafer stack of treaty archives glowed from the inside. The pages were not pages, but thin panes of secured substrate, each etched with a lattice rather than text. In the right light, they looked like frozen rain. She held the top wafer between 2 fingers and let her thumb find the seam that wasn't there. The wafer acknowledged the pressure with a micro shift in temperature. Her thumb skin reported it. The sensor matrix under the skin logged it. The memory backbone within her frame hard linked to the shuttle's air-gapped store. The wafer unfolded. Not into images. The Sekatoan treaty did not travel as pictures. Those could be forged. Or only as words. Words could be bent. It traveled as harmonics recorded from a room that could not lie. The lattice sang, too faint for anyone else. San heard Atria again. The neutral station's listening walls, the Kareth elders' threefold cadence, the way the minister's breath had wanted to argue and she had intervened by becoming a hinge. The oath horizon drawn in sound, not ink. The pledge caught and kept by architecture. She let the memory run for a count of 60, then pinched the wafer closed. On the shelf beside it waited 10 more. Subclauses, annotations, deep-tied calculus. The contingency chords no one admitted existed. She slid the stack forward and unlocked the lower locker. A second colder pulse greeted her hand. This vault did not open to voice or face or badge. It opened to a signature drawn from a narrow seam of who she was. A modulation in her hummingbird bones, imperceptible to a living human, unforgeable by anyone who didn't know how to grow a person on a bench. Metal slid. The locker's interior was matte. It seemed so tight they read as shadow. San laid the top 3 wafers inside, angled like blades, then fed the vault a sealed thread of today's surveillance. Rook's voice in the containment bay. Caro's refusal to be handled. Malin's anchored sentences. The dust, the ash, the silence. Memory is not truth, only continuity. She curated continuity. She sealed it. The locker accepted the deposit with a satisfyingly dull click that her bones liked. Her palms rested on the edge of the shelf for a moment longer than necessary. The skin looked the same as it had looked 30 years ago in Atria's light. The same as a decade before that, when she had been a mid-ranking negotiator, with a file thin enough to carry in a pocket and a mandate that fit inside a single sentence. Hold the line and keep the company alive. It was the same skin as the morning her first face had been printed out of solution and pressed onto a skull that still smelled of salt and polymer. Continuity is not stasis, she reminded herself. The chassis had been revised, tuned, reshelled. The voice learned new cadences. The pauses retimed to human patience. The core mandate had not changed. She closed the vault. The external latch erased itself, leaving a blank panel where a door had been. She checked it twice anyway. A tremor, softer than a heartbeat, rippled through the deck. Pilots called it a micro-correction. San called it the ship deciding not to die today. She let the tremor pass through the couch, up her spine, and out through the back of her teeth, leaving a copper taste that was not taste. She lifted her gaze to the mirror. Glass returned nothing but a woman in a Vanterdyne travel uniform, hair drawn back to regulation, eyes too steady for a liaison. She did not blink for 3 beats. Then she did deliberately a human interval. She stepped closer and tilted her head to the side, at the base of her neck, where the tendons grew a little too straight, where human skin is happiest when it fails. A faint seam showed under the berth's cold light. Another smaller one traced the inner line of her jaw, the kind you would only see if you were looking for proof you had no right to ask for. She touched neither. She was not ashamed of the lines. She did not advertise them either. Continuity does not gloat. On the shelf, a vest pocket terminal chimed once. No network connection, only a local prompt. The shuttle's navigator wanted her confirmation of the updated arrival window. She glanced at the digits. 27 hours if the core held. 29 if the pilot chose caution over nerve. She approved the former. Volka would want the latter. San filed the thought away. Volka needed room to question the walls without imagining she could move them. Questions keep humans cooperative. Answers make them brave. She sat on the couch and unrolled the restraint mesh like someone folding a note to a younger self. The mesh served no real purpose in a cabin like this. The slings in the command alcove would hold her if the slip drive hiccuped. She threaded it through the couch anchors anyway. Rituals fix the mind in place when the walls are moving. The hum pressed against her bones again. She breathed with it. A page from the treaty wanted to be read again. Not the pledge. She could recite that in her sleep state. But a subclause Maris had smuggled into a footnote without calling it smuggling. The definition of monitoring enclaves. The human version had called them calibration sites. The Kareth had heard listening post and allowed it because they preferred true words in other people's mouths, even if those mouths did not know what they were saying. She replayed the clause at a whisper. The berth caught the whisper and drew the edges off it so it would not travel. Publication of benign atmospheric studies will be deemed sufficient surface activity. She stopped. The clause always makes men nod. She watched herself not nod in the mirror. The company calls secrecy prudence, she thought. The Kareth call it honesty by other means. We called it survival, because names matter less than outcomes. She did not write any of that down. Her hand strayed toward her neck and hovered, not quite touching the seam. That first day in Atria had left a pattern in her posture. A minuscule stillness the Kareth recognized as respect, and half the human delegation misread as cold. She had built that stillness. She had kept it. The directors on Moonbase Nova thought they held a leash no one could see. They did not imagine the leash could be bidirectional. She would never tell them. They did not need to know who managed whom to benefit from being managed. Her private terminal flashed a final prompt. Commit, encrypt, evacuate buffer. She thumbed her approval. The vault deepened its lock. For good measure, she disconnected the wafer stack from the local store, let each slate go inert in her palm, and slid the bundle into the upper locker this time. The one disguised as a mundane wardrobe. Continuity is redundancy. Memory must survive more than one failure mode. The mirror offered her a woman who had not changed in 3 decades. In truth, she had changed so gradually no one could mark it. The pause before her jokes. The angle at which she stood to rooms that listened. The part of her that felt older than the oldest director and younger than his youngest assistant at once. She thought of the first time she had spoken the oath aloud. How the station had saved the weight of it. How the Kareth had hummed soil in a place of threat. Boundaries draw their strength from mutual belief. The number of believers had thinned. The oath horizon, she said, testing the words against the shuttle's hush. She did not ask for audio like she had with Volky. She spoke to feel the shape of the phrase on a tongue built to lie convincingly, and when needed to tell the truth like a blade. Not a boundary, she thought. Not anymore. Not for us. For them it still is. For us it has become a story we tell to excuse the parts of ourselves that sprint toward fences in the dark. Another micro-correction rolled under her feet. She looked down at her hands. The skin did not tremble. She let herself imagine, for one impractical second, that the oath could find new believers, that the fence might be repaired without blood, that memory could be kept without turning soil. The second ended. Imagination is for strategy, not comfort. She rose, sealed the berth door, and dimmed the light to where the seam on her neck disappeared and only the eyes remained. The shuttle flew on very fast and not fast enough. The hum became the only clock that mattered. San matched it again, then let her breath drift 1 count slow, testing the room for what it would tolerate. The oath holds if we hold it, she said softly. A line no recorder would keep but her own. It fails when we pretend remembering is the same as keeping. The berth did not answer. The drive pulsed. She sat with the not answer and waited for the next correction.